Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me. In my book review series, Freemasonry and Satanism, and this is number 279. Twas a famous victory, deception, propaganda in the war with Germany. Benjamin Colby. So I've mentioned it before. I've been doing this research for years, since 2005, on WTH. What the heck is going on? And I am convinced that the world was deceived into participating in World War I and World War II. And the culprits were the secret society, Illuminati, Kabbalist, Zionist, people who control the world from behind the scenes for the past few hundred years, causing revolutions and so much more. And this book tells us a lot. I want to find out who and what and why for World War II. Get this book. Deception, Propaganda, and the War with Germany. Let me tell you about the back of this book. This is important stuff. If this is true, like 911, inside job, and so much more, we're in trouble, and we need to wake up. All right, the falsehoods employed to win the war. They lost the peace. Franklin Delano Roosevelt preaches neutrality, but Harry the Hop tells Churchill will fight. The Atlantic Charter as official screen for hiding Soviet aims. Roosevelt asked Soviet ambassador for help in whitewashing the communist persecution of religion. So they had to lie to the media, the newspapers here in the United States, radio, etc., so the American people would not learn the truth. Roosevelt friends admit he lied us into war. All the news that fits the tint. How the New York Times, Time, and most of the press treated the Katyn massacre. So apparently when Russia invaded Poland, they did what the communists normally do. They do a purge. All the people that are leaders or religious leaders or teachers, the intelligences, they purge them, they kill them all. Communism. And communism, in my opinion, is alive and well today. It's called the New Age and the pursuit of a global world order. And the weapons they're using are dumping chemicals into the sky, microwave transmissions, terrorism, sustainability, global warming, and so much more, economic upsets, and mind control, shootings, bombings. All this is going on. We are at war. And the same people are responsible for the war we're at today that's in this book. 'Twas a famous victory. We've all been lied to. Hollywood's red clique, we already know that. The movies that are coming out right now, this is 2020, are clearly made to insinuate that the Jews are suffering serious persecution and attacks, even today. Roosevelt scores critics of aid to Russia as bonus patriot, noisy traitors, betrayers of America, betrayers of Christianity itself, would-be dictators. So anybody who tried to speak up for the truth back then, that Russia, which previously had a Russian Revolution after World War I, and if you go on Jeff Rentz's website and many other documents on the internet, apparently when the Bolshevik Jews invaded Russia after World War I, they purged that country of Christians and other good people. Basically, it was revenge. White House protection of communists in key posts. So while Stalin was over there mass murdering Poles and good Christian Russians and all that, the White House in the United States was protecting the communists and pumping news into the media, praising Russia, blatant lies, and they knew it. But there's a side to this that's interesting, and that is Roosevelt himself was a 32-degree Mason, so he was definitely in cahoots with the secret society, Kabbalist, Zionist. Churchill continues to urge the bombing of civilian populations removed from military targets. So the United States and Britain made a decision to bomb civilian targets all over the German area, formerly Prussia. A lot of people don't know that. Like the United States has 50 states. Well, back then, a lot of those countries were forming a trade alliance, the Kingdom of Prussia, because they were trying to set up a defense system against Britain, who of course was called the kingdom where the sun never sets, and Britain was controlling India and parts of China and most of the whole world. And even in America, we had declared independence from Britain. So the people in the German area, Austria, all of Prussia, and all those surrounding countries were trying to have an alliance with each other. This is why they all had to be destroyed, FYI, in my opinion, from my research. That's the truth. They were not an evil axis by any stretch of the imagination. Matter of fact, the evil axis was coming out of Britain, the country where the United States had declared independence from in 1776. But those banksters had infiltrated America, and in 1913, prior to World War I, had taken over our money supply and controlled our politicians and our country. And after World War I, there was a worldwide depression, and especially so in the United States in the 1920s and even into the 1930s. So the people were pretty much putty in these deceivers' hands and had to create an enemy, and they targeted the Prussians, the Germans. And even there was a book that came out prior to World War II by some Jewish people, that Germany must perish, that every single person with any German DNA needed to be eliminated from the face of the earth. And apparently the secret societies were behind that in their Kabbalah, mystery religion of Babylon cults. Okay, Red Stout and his Writers' War Board, we shall hate or we shall fail. So they really were trying to use propaganda to get the people in America to hate the Germans. Why hatred of all Germans was necessary for the Roosevelt administration. So he clearly knew what he was doing, and he was a 32-degree Mason, along with all the other people in his government. The tragic toll of unconditional surrender. Henry Wallace hails the Soviets for their ethnic democracy while they're slaughtering people. Stalin refuses to acknowledge U.S. Lend-Lease. Sir Robert Vinstert, England's font of hate, he disciples in America, his disciples in America. So in America, they had propaganda agents coaching our leaders from England. American scientists suggest that German stock be diluted by outbreeding. Joseph Pulitzer calls for the execution of 1.5 million Germans. This is before the war. Soviet atrocities, the Great Cover-Up. Allies refused to support the anti-Hitler underground. So the underground over there in Germany wanted to kill Hitler and all the Nazis and cooperate with the world. But the secret societies, Roosevelt and Britain, all the elites had to have their vicious war. And they wouldn't settle for peace And a lot of people pleaded with them that we're going to kill Hitler and the Nazis and work with the world for peace. But they needed a vicious battle that was a clear dominance of the world. And that's why in the end, even when Japan wanted to surrender, they wouldn't accept the surrender. They wanted to use those nuclear bombs. They had to for their further plans for World War III, where we are today. FCC pressures radio stations with anti-communist broadcasters. So radio stations that were talking about anti-communist situations were being pressured by the FCC to not do that. Tehran in Iran and Yalta, what the people were told and what really happened. Roosevelt signs millions of conquered Germans into Soviet slavery, and how to sell the People's Paradise to skeptical Americans. The Morgenthau Plan, vindictiveness at national policy. The truth about precision bombing. Total victory, Americans attacked huddled orphans fleeing a firebombed city. So if you're at all curious what's likely to repeat itself, history, what it's going to be like when they bring us World War III, and the purge, the people who know what's going on, will be singled out, and according, that's probably all the Christians too, and the people who are not pro-New Age, gay rainbow coalition types, and a global world order with a system similar to China, where the artificial intelligence and computers grades everybody on their behavior. And if you're not a good, loyal, satanic, luciferic rainbow coalition citizen, and you want to have a conscience that's Christian, you certainly will not have a job or an apartment or a bank account, just like the Bible says. You won't be able to buy or sell, and you'll have the electronic mark of the beast. But let me just read from this book a little bit, Twas a Famous Victory, and try to make something really clear. I've been reading this book. You can see that I do. I highlight in yellow things that's important, and you can see this is chapter 4. Tight lid on Soviet aims. So after World War I, of course, the Bolshevik Jews invaded Russia with the cooperation of world leaders, taking over the train stations and everything else. It was a secret espionage revolution. They snuck in there after World War I was over, probably when the Russian guard was down. This was World War I, before communism. So the World War I is over, and the Russians are probably celebrating, as well as the whole world was. In the meantime, there were a lot of mercenaries and troops coming in at night, abducted the Tsar and his family, executed them all. And then the purge in Russia began, almost 10 to 20 years of slaughter, tearing down the Christian churches and killing the Christians and a lot of other Russians, particularly because prior to that, Russia wouldn't put up with the behavior of certain Jewish people. They had something called pogroms, P-O-G-R-A-M-S, and they policed them because of the activities were disturbing, just like you would in any country. And so they fled to Poland, and then they caused problems in Poland, so they fled to Germany. And Germany had a plethora of Jews living in prosperity, loving where they lived in World War I. But there were Zionists behind the scenes who wanted all those Jewish people to migrate into the Middle East to bring about the country of Israel we have today. So it took them World War I and World War II to get that. Looks like I got to readjust my camera for future videos, because when the sun hits it just right, everything looks kind of dark to me. But let me read from the book, and you can look at my dark shadow. See this mural behind me. It tells us everything. It's on the back of the dollar bill. It's on federal buildings. These are the people that brought us World War I, World War II, 9/11, assassination of President Kennedy, and so much more. I've been doing book reviews, and this is number 279. And I encourage everybody to go get this book on used book sites, maybe $5 or $10. Deception and Propaganda to the War with Germany, World War II. And if it's all true, which it appears to be, I've made a lot of book reviews. This is 279, almost closing in on 300 books that I've reviewed on these topics, and all this seems to be true. And if it is true, and World War III is looming, and it's the same people, and it aligns perfectly with biblical prophecy, it's all a satanic Lucifer plot, and the people, according to laws passed in the 1970s by George Bush Sr., something called the Noahide laws, passed in secret, making it the religious law of the land, even though we're supposed to have separation of church and state. But it says people who worship false idols will be beheaded, and apparently there's evidence, if you go look on the internet, of the government purchasing thousands and thousands of guillotines. And apparently if they declare Christianity a false religion, believing in Jesus will be considered heresy, punishable by beheading. All this is in a biblical alignment. We're headed for some tough times ahead, so it seems, here in February 28, 2020. The past 2 days, the stock market has been plunging. Of course, they have the coronavirus spreading around the world, and even on my iPhone, I got a text alert from the Center for Disease. So we don't know what they could start doing next week and say the whole country's quarantine, martial law, mandatory vaccines. It could all take place in March 2020. But all I can do is make these videos, and maybe people will wake up and go get the books I've been sharing and other documents I've been sharing, and we can save ourselves. So I'd like to believe. The tight lid on Soviet aims. The Declaration of the United Nations, with the bogus Soviet adherence to its stated aims, was made public on January 1, 1942. The bogus Soviet adherence, with a great fanfare as evidence of the noble objective of the war. So Roosevelt was clearly lying to the people when he said, as a 32-degree Mason, you can go look it up, that he was doing this so that all the world's people would be free and able to practice a religion of their choice, and to have their national governments and govern themselves. Complete opposite of what the communists pursue. But apparently, to me, the high-level Freemasons, Illuminati, and all the secret societies are exactly in league with the Zionist, Kabbalist, communist. And so they're all one and the same, but they play each other off of each other and fool the rest of us. All the signing nations, said President Roosevelt, has subscribed to the purposes and principles of the Atlantic Charter. Again, the Atlantic Charter was something he said that supported America to get into World War I, to defend freedom for people all over the world, a 32-degree Mason, and would employ their full resources against the enemy to defend life, liberty, and independence, and religious freedom, and to preserve human rights and justice. And as I read on here, you're going to see what they say and what they did is not the same by any stretch of the imagination. And I can't make a dent in that in this 1-hour video, but you can get this book and read it and cry. Secretary of State Hall hailed the declaration as proof that the law-abiding and peace-loving nations could unite in war to preserve liberty and justice and the fundamental values of mankind. So these same people control our world today. And of course, the installation of microwave transmitters everywhere, dumping chemicals in the sky for the past 20 years, artificial intelligence and genetic manipulation of even the trees and the plants and the humans and everything has been continuing. We're a stone's throw away from them turning a switch on and people being under total mesmeric mind control by the heavy metals in their body, microwave transmissions and audiograms, messages sent to your brain. And all this has been going on for 20 years, obviously, but all the way since the end of World War II. So it's 70 years. And they've been having all these laboratories underground and in secret and abducting people, experimenting on humans, and all the stuff we've seen in the news. There's no doubt about this. And every time they need a lot of money, they cause an economic recession, depression, and all the people all over the planet lose everything they have, and the elites buy it up on pennies on the dollar, and then they let the economy grow again for 8 or 9 or 10 years, and then they crash it again and again and again. It's their tool. Okay, so victory for the Allied Nations, Roosevelt told the Congress January 6th, meant victory for democracy and for the ideal of family, the simple principles of common decency and humanity. The United Nations objectives were not only the smashing of militarism, but establishing and securing freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of want, freedom from fear everywhere in the world. And we can obviously see, if anybody's coherent at all, aware at all, intelligent at all, that freedom from fear around the world is the opposite of what is taking place. The Arabs are not the threat. All the Arabs are being deemed evil now, but back then it was the Prussian Empire that's being deemed evil back then prior to World War II. So just think about that. Off towards the East, Asia, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, all those countries, the East, are deemed to be the evil people and have been destroyed viciously since 2001. Moving towards the West a little bit, but between Britain and the East is, of course, Germany and all those countries, Romania, Austria, Prussia, a huge kingdom. And if you keep moving this way, you get to Britain, the kingdom that rules the world. But this Prussian Empire was deemed to be the evil people all over the world, and they were destroyed. And now they're destroying the East. So they got the East, and then they had the middle, the Prussians, and next will be probably America and the rest of the world. So according to Roosevelt, the fight was not only for ourselves, but for all men and all generations. The aim was to cleanse the world of ancient evils and ancient ills. So there's a truth statement coming from Roosevelt, but people didn't understand what it really meant. The aim was to cleanse the world of ancient evils and ancient ills. So the 2,000 years of persecution of the Jewish people, according to biblical accounts, is an ancient evil and an ancient ill, and they want to cleanse the world of that. Of course, the Christians would be the guilty party, as well as the Islamic Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus and decent people who do not want to worship Satan. They're going to be deemed to be the evil forces, and the evil will be declared to be good, which is prophesied at end times. Good will be called bad, and bad will be called good, and they're doing it. I just copied a bunch of pictures off of Yahoo image site on the Burning Man festivals. Oh my goodness. It's a witchcraft thing, and they have this gigantic straw man, and traditionally they would actually put some males inside of it and set it afire and burn all the men in this gigantic big straw man, like a big wooden cage. Witchcraft sacrifice rituals. And there was so many people, I think 50,000, 70,000 attended it this year. and all the statues and symbols and their behavior is all in line with the Satanism and the Rainbow Coalition, pansexualism. So the people who brought us World War I and World War II are certainly getting closer and closer to bringing us World War III. And it may not be guns and bombs. It could just be a virus or collapsing the banking system and so much more. People rioting in the streets because they can't get water or food or gas, etc. And then martial law and electronic surveillance and targeting and drugs. And the purge will begin. Along with these noble aims was a fearful warnings. America was in great danger. Just like 9/11, back then they said that the Germans, the Prussians, America was in great danger. Just like after 9/11, the Middle East, the world is in danger. And of course, threats about China, the world is in danger. The Russian, the world is in danger. The Venezuelans, build a big wall for the Mexicans. So it just goes on and on and on. And we, the people, appear to be kind of absent-minded and apathetic. And people don't want to stand up and step up and start saying that this is wrong. Everybody just wants to continue on with their life thinking it's going to continue that way, but obviously it's not. Just like with the coronavirus continuing, or the stock market plunging today, and so much more. All the plans are in place, all the electronics. Deborah Tavares was talking about it on a video. Apparently with all the stuff they've been dumping into the sky, the heavy metals, along with some other technologies, they are genetically engineering the trees and humans. And if you get a magnifying glass, you can look at your arm and see little wiry polymers. And apparently with the AI and electronic microwaves, they're going to actually kick all that in, turn it all on, and make robots out of humans. Deborah Tavares, recent couple of videos, and I'm sure there's plenty of other warnings out there. But this book here talks about World War II and the deception on the world. So here's what the Roosevelt and then press was telling Americans prior to World War II. And it was all a lie. Germany had no intentions and did not want war with the United States. The enemy could come in and shell New York tomorrow night under certain conditions. And they could even probably drop bombs on Detroit. At this time, when the nation was physically threatened, aid to Russia, he said, could be measured in terms of dead Germans and smashed tanks. So this is after World War I, and then took place the Russian Revolution in 1917. And of course, 1913, the same evil people, the Illuminati, Kabbalists, high-level Freemasons, Zionist people, etc., took over the USA money supply so they could finance World War I. And after that, of course, they invaded Russia, and they used the control over the USA money supply to bring us into the Great Depression, and setting the stage for World War II. And in the meantime, after the Bolshevik Jews invaded Russia after World War I, killing up to 100 million. 100 million! Go look on Jeff Rentz's website or other documents. Christians and other good people. 100 million. And when Russia invaded Poland, huge massacres of people. They took a lot of the military officers into captivity and slaughtered many of them, which apparently, according to this book, the U.S. government, Roosevelt and his henchmen knew about, and prevented it from making the headlines, so the people would not question why the United States was supplying Russia with food and military equipment, tanks and everything, while they were murdering all of the Christians and good citizens. And that, of course, Prussia, all those countries around Germany, were a significant force. So that's why they had World War I, to destroy Prussia, and World War II to destroy Prussia again, Germany, Austria, all those countries, Romania. And Russia wanted a lot of Poland's land, and they made deals with other countries. Yugoslavia could have some land. So there was a lot of backdoor deals going on between all these communist forces. Crazy. Those who questioned large Soviet aid, fearing that Russia might be too powerful after the war, were lumped with the term in American Cleveland set of Washington. So they ridiculed the people who knew what was going on, just like today people are called climate deniers if you don't want to buy the story of the world heating up and boiling over, burning over, and the economic problems, terrorism, sustainability. People are going to be taken off of, they are being taken off of rural land, and fires everywhere, herding them into the city with the electronic systems, so that people can be systematically killed. Even Deborah Travers says they have a quota of humans on the planet they need to kill each and every year. So they want to do it slowly so people can't really catch on what's going on. And I'm not making these videos up. Go watch, look up Deborah Travers and watch her last 4 videos and her other ones. Dane Wigington, Bill Deagle, and so many more. And my YouTube channel was canceled July 2019, along with Brother Nathaniel and many other people's channel. So they are censoring the information now prior to World War III, but I believe we're already in it, just like they did prior to World War II and prior to World War I. And 9/11, and so much more. All right, continuing on. While admonishing the nation about its great peril, the president held the Atlantic Charter, to which Russia had subscribed on paper, as a moral shield. In a February 23rd broadcast, he again stressed that the United Nations were agreed on the broad principles of the peace which was sought. The Atlantic Charter, he said, applies not only to the parts of the world that border the Atlantic, but to the whole world. Disarmament of aggressors, self-determination of nations and peoples, and the 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, freedom from fear. As this was spoken, Roosevelt and others high in the administration knew that Stalin had no intention of establishing freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from fear, or any Soviet-controlled territory unless the Soviet departed totally from its existing practices. So they knew they were lying to the people. As to territorial seizures, Stalin had followed his specific reservations to the Atlantic Charter's pledge by laying the Russian territorial demands on the line to Anthony Eden, British Foreign Minister, in early December. Eden in Moscow, seeking a Russian-British treaty of alliance, had been told flatly that Stalin's price was Eastern Poland and part of Finland, together with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. East Prussia would be transferred to Poland. Romania was to be given to the USSR. Special facility for bases would be compensated by territory taken from Hungary. Prior to World War II, Britain, the United States, and Russia was already divvying up all of these countries' lands. If the American people knew this, of course, they would have been hell to pay for that. Later, he was induced to lower his asking price for the treaty to recognition of the seizure of the Baltic states and parts of Finland, with other demands temporarily held aside. Prior to World War II, all this dickering was going on, and all of these leaders in America and the American peoples knew about the huge slaughter going on in Russia by the same people who brought us World War I and participated in the Russian Revolution, financed by the Rothschilds and banking and secret society Illuminati organizations, all whose religion appears to be the Kabbalah, mystery religion of Babylon, whore of Babylon, anti-Christian, including an anti-Christ leader coming at somewhere according to Bible prophecy. The Department of State knew all this. It had at no time been in doubt. So the government had no doubt all this was going on, and that the Soviets were just appeasing and saying what was necessary to be said, so the United States could completely finance Russia with tanks, food, money, and everything else they needed. And Russia was quite indignant about it. It already, as we just read here, acknowledged it was going to take all those countries' properties in seizure prior to World War II. And of course, after World War II, the Iron Wall went up, and Russia did take all those territories, as we all know. And when they took down the wall, that was all a facade. They still had all controls of those countries and monies, and had divvied up all the national resources amongst themselves. So this, which would make the Soviet Union the dominating power of Eastern Europe, if not the whole continent. So think about it again. I had my hand up here. They were demonized in Asia. They were demonized in Prussia, Germany. In Russia, they were killing all the Christians and good people and planned on dominating the world. And all the way over here in America, we were assisting with all of this whole program, which was all designed 300 years ago with the creation of the State of Israel and Palestine, Zionism. And they had plenty of congresses and meetings about creating the New World Order, global world order. And even in 1860, after the war between the North and South in the United States, 1863 to 1866-67, Albert Pike, the general for the South, wrote to his Freemasonic friend in Italy that it would take 3 world wars to bring about this global world order. So they all are in cahoots. The Freemasons, Illuminati, Zionist, Kabbalist, and secret societies, Rainbow Coalition, liberals, and of course a lot of people participating in this don't know what they're doing. They've been deceived. Before Eden left for Moscow, Secretary Hull, citing the Atlantic Charter, had asked for no specific commitments be made at this time. This stand against the territorial clauses in the proposed treaty was maintained strongly while the British-Russian discussions went on, but the qualifications at this time were always present. The demands, although assailed in Department of State papers as contrary to the Atlantic Charter, were not refused permanently. A memorandum by Secretary Hull to President Roosevelt, dated February 4th, said such an agreement at the present time would have the unfortunate effect upon the attitude of the small countries everywhere. Don't you think if the world's people, the American people, knew that they were going to seize all these territories from Prussia, Germany, Poland, Romania, Estonia, Finland, don't you think that the world would have said no way? But this all had to be kept from the public. Meanwhile, the Roosevelt and all the henchmen in the United States were saying that Detroit and New York could be bombed tomorrow, and they were sending all the tanks and equipment and money and food to Russia. And at this particular time, World War II was not declared by the United States. All this was going on, and all this dickering, all this positioning. As Hull put it, later arrangements could be discussed at the proper time with no commitments to individual countries at this time. But the British government, according to the editor of the Harry Hopkins papers, had always regarded the Atlantic Charter with its noble pledges as not much more than a publicity handout. From the Atlantic Conference, Churchill had telegraphed his cabinet that Roosevelt was determined on the proclamation because of its prospective effect on the American public opinion. So here he is telling the public, Four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, freedom from fear. A 32-degree Mason, working under the control of the Illuminati, who were the same people who invaded Russia, who were bent on world global order. They lied, they lied, they lied, they lied, and it's all in this book. And it would be most imprudent on our part to raise unnecessary difficulties. So they didn't want the public to know about these details, because most prudent on our part not to raise unnecessary difficulties. So, you know, the people don't know what's good for them. We don't need to tell them anything. They don't know. He was now quite ready to forget the Charter's pledges to get the Russian treaty, and reminded Roosevelt that the basis on which Russia acceded to the Charter was that it kept the frontiers occupied when attacked by Germany. Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden, 3 weeks later, also reminded Undersecretary Wells that the understanding that had been accompanied Soviet adherence to the Charter meant that, consequently, the Baltic states were a part of the Russian territory. So all those countries north of the Mediterranean, west of Asia, Iraq, Iran, all those countries, the Baltic states, Lithuania, were discussed back then to have been discussed to all belong to the Russian territory, and Russia was deeming to be the dominant world power, and apparently Roosevelt, 32-degree Mason, and other people were all in cahoots, lying to the American people, all in this book. Twas a famous victory. We've all seen the movies and the celebrations, and all the people in Germany and all those surrounding countries. The Prussian kingdom, it was actually called at one time, encompassed the whole area the size of the United States. And that's what Britain had to destroy, and that's what Russia had to destroy, because, you know, it threatened the Russian Empire, the Prussian Empire, and the Prussian Empire threatened British control of the world. And of course, in 1913, after not having control of the USA money supply for 50 years, and attempted assassinations on a couple presidents, one or two actually assassinated, they regained control of the American money supply so they could have World War I, and then give us the Great Depression. Everybody lose everything, starving, and they keep doing this, popping these bubbles, so they call it, like they probably will do next, blaming it on the coronavirus. So they have very sophisticated plans and tools available to them. Again, I repeat, with the AI, artificial intelligence, microwave transmitters, heavy metals in our bodies, along with other polymers, we're actually being turned into mechanical humans. And go watch Deborah Tavares and other people's videos on these topics. I made videos on them, and I will make more of them and more of them. I've got the books on these topics. Looking for that one book. Here it is. Apparently, hosted by Joss Del Sol, 5G Crisis, Awareness and Accountability. Look at that, 1,000 pages maybe? So he had all of these professors and other experts on his show talking about all the dangers of this. And then they copied all these interviews and put them in this big, thick book you can buy. So the transmitters and the polymers, the heavy metals in our body, the AI, the mind control is all part of the tools for World War III. Faced with the prospect of a flat negation of the territorial clause in the Atlantic Charter by both Britain and Russia, Roosevelt proposed a face-saving compromise. He suggested a reciprocal exchange of populations. A reciprocal exchange of populations for the Baltic states and the Finnish territory, Finland, in which the inhabitants who did not wish to live under communism could leave those territories with their properties and belongings. They could take communism or they could get out. So that's what the deal that Roosevelt made with Stalin, while Stalin was slaughtering all those people in Russia, up to 100 million. You can go look at jeffrentz.com, and look it up on the internet. Christians killed during the Bolshevik Revolution, and see 100 million. Some documents say 66 million. Apparently, an Israeli newspaper admitted it was 25 million. Nowhere near the so-called 6 million Jews killed in Germany, which was all part of a big deception if you read this stuff. Germany did not want to go into war, and Germany had made arrangements with the Zionists that all the Jews could be deported to Palestine to create the state of Israel. But they had a huge problem, is that a lot of Jews didn't want to leave Germany, and there are for basic conversational purposes, there are two types of Jews. The Ashkenazi Jews, the Vikings, Nordics, who are not Hebrews, but converted to the Kabbalah Judaism, the Talmud, 1,200 years ago. They were known as the Khazars, Khazarians, next door neighbors to the Mongolian barbarians, Genghis Khan, who ravaged all of Asia and parts of Europe. So these people were very vicious, very barbarian. The king wanted to adopt a religion for his country. And back then, Khazaria would have encompassed part of the Baltic states all the way up to Germany and a huge part of Russia. It was a huge kingdom, Khazaria, between the Asia and, of course, Western Europe, Britain, France, and all of that. These are the ones who became 50%, or I should say more than that now, 80% of the so-called Jews. So you try to think about, when you say Jew, what does Jew mean? Is Jew a race of people? Are we talking about the ancient Hebrews who were guided out of Egypt by Moses and promised the land of Canaan, the now called Israel, that area, all the way to the Euphrates and Iraq, which is part of their plans for a greater Israel. So they want to regain the old kingdom of Judea property lines. But they're not Hebrews, they're Vikings and Nordics, Khazarians, Khazars. So when you say Jew, are you talking about the Vikings and Nordics, white people, vicious barbarians, also bloodlines with the Mongolians, which are part Asians, which ravaged all over Asia and parts of Europe? So you say Jew, you say, wait a minute, am I talking about the white Nordics, Ashkenazis, or the Shepherdetics, the shepherds, the original Hebrews, which are treated as second-class citizens in Israel today, in the world? So when you say Jew, what are you talking about? And if it's not the race, if it's not the Ashkenazi, white Viking, Nordics, barbarians, and it's not the Hebrews, the Shepherdetics, then what does it mean to be a Jew? Is it a religion? And if it's a religion, well, there's a big problem with that, because the Jews living in Germany, a lot of them were Torah Jews. The Torah is the Old Testament of the Bible. And of course, the Kabbalah, the witchcraft book, is Talmud Jews. So the Jews, or if you call them Jews, in Germany were probably had a huge divide between Torah Jews, the Old Testament and the Bible, and Talmud Jews, the Kabbalah witchcraft book. And so the problem is the people they wanted to populate Palestine with for the state of Israel, they wanted the witchcraft Talmud Ashkenazi Jews. They didn't want the Shepherdetic or Torah Jews. So it was a big political divide, as big as Democrats and Republicans was a divide between the Jews, the Torah good Jews, and the Talmud, Kabbalah, witchcraft bad Jews, satanic Jews. And of course in Revelation 2.9 and 3.9, it clearly says, Jews who call themselves Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. So all the people that populated Israel today, that had been migrating from countries all over the world, and all kinds of anti-Semitism and hateism. Hate was created intentionally to get all these people to migrate over there to fulfill biblical prophecy. And all the deception was even taking place prior to World War II by the same people. Remember, Roosevelt here was a 32-degree Mason, and Harry Hopkins was a high-level Zionist Jewish guy doing all the brokering and negotiating going on. And of course here Roosevelt is giving the land to all those Baltic states to Russia, making a deal that the citizens of all those countries could take communism or get out. And communism is the same thing as this New World Order globalism, Rainbow Coalition, pansexualism, anti-Christianity. FYI. So much to be said, so little time. All I can do is read these books and get continued confirmation that this is what's going on, and I explain it as best as I can. The proposal, as characterized by the Department of State memorandum, in which Wells agreed, amounted to a mass exile of populations with no place to go and whose only crime is that they exist. Now think about it. Since 9/11, all those countries where the leaders have been slaughtered, killed, imprisoned, the governments toppled, and all those Arabs and people in the Middle East have been migrating into France and Germany and Britain and America and all over the world. So back before World War II, they proposed that for the Prussian area, German, Austria, Romania, all those countries. And of course, years later with 9/11, they're proposing that from displacing all those people in the Middle East. So two areas the size of the United States. And World War I and apparently the ongoing World War III since 9/11 going on now, except that a lot of people are not acknowledging a World War III is taking place. But then again, all these things I'm talking about in this book, World War II was not declared. Japan did not attack Pearl Harbor yet. So World War II was taking place, but the people didn't know it, just like now. Anyways, moving on. But Wells suggested to the British ambassador that the treaty with this clause would be more nearly in accord with the spirit of the Atlantic Charter than without it, and the arrangement would make it easier for the American public opinion to tolerate the transaction. So if the people knew that this was the deal, you think the people in America would have participated? And when Delano Roosevelt was running for re-election, he kept saying to his audiences, "I will not take our young men and women to war. We Americans are not going to fight battles overseas," while he was negotiating and promising Britain and Churchill that he was going to do that. And apparently Roosevelt had a big ego, alter ego, and thought it was his destiny to do all this to save the world from entire destruction. And of course, he's a 32-degree Mason, and apparently a lot of those people have that kind of insane mentality. Not to mention who the president is right now. When he makes his speeches, if you've been watching, and he's continually praises himself. We've never had an economy like this. We've never done all of this. Nobody else has ever matched me. He just does it and does it and does it, when, in my opinion, the opposite is true. And the stock market's falling again right now, and it could be just a huge scheme to make a lot of people lose a lot of money and bring us the coronavirus and scare tactics, so a lot of people sell. And then probably the elite banksters who want to get a lot of money probably sold first before the public caught on. You don't think everybody in every living room from California to North Carolina and New York to Texas sat in there and said, well, the coronavirus is coming. I guess I better sell all my stocks. It's much bigger than that. The elites do it to start the panic. So Stalin ignored the scheme about saying that there's this Atlantic Charter that's going to bring freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom from want and freedom from fear to the world. He was just appeasing the leaders for the newspapers so that the American politicians and elites that own the newspapers could feed some nice sentences to the American people saying that the Stalin's Russia was actually a budding democracy. Meanwhile, they're of course killing 100 million Christians and other good people. So after that, you had World War II, where they did all of that in Germany and Prussia. And after that, you had 9/11, where they're doing it all over the Middle East. I mean, what does it take, I wanted to get people to wake up? His demands always frankly stated, although kept secret by the West. So Roosevelt and the leaders in the West, America, would not tell the world what Stalin made very clear. It says frankly stated, were set, and the British went ahead with the plans to sign a treaty on the Soviets' terms. So Britain and America, our leaders behind the scenes, were making deals with the communists. And again, there's so much more in this book. Roosevelt was even protecting and encouraging the communist political parties to grow in the United States, believe it or not. Meanwhile, he and the other world leaders knew that they were slaughtering Christians and other people in Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution, after World War I. And basically it was for revenge for the prior 100 years of the Russian Tsar and the leadership having police actions, pogroms on the Jewish people, because they were causing so much disturbances and problems with their money lending and other dealings. They were taking over all the properties and farms of all of the people and then leasing them back to the people, where the citizens were so poor they were actually starving, because in payment for renting those properties, they would confiscate all their entire crops. And then the Jewish brokers and other elites were selling those off for huge amounts of money. So it was a very interesting story how all that worked. Apparently, all of those lands in Poland and Germany and Russia back then were owned by princes and dukes and other elites. And they didn't like managing it or managing the people, the peasants. And if you lived on that land, I guess you were owned by the dukes and the princesses and all that. So what these elites did, because they didn't want to take care of their responsibilities with these lands and the citizens that lived on these lands, they had a subcontract out with the Jewish people, who promised them certain amounts of money if they could take over control of the land. And then they made deals with the citizens, sold them a lot of beer, and then loaned them some money which they couldn't pay back, and they became virtual slaves. And it caused such poverty and destruction all over Poland and other countries, Ukraine and Georgia and Russia, that the leaders of those countries had to punish the dukes and princesses that owned all those lands for making all those deals with all those Jewish people. And again, I hesitate to use the word Jew, because were they Hebrews? Were they Akhenazi, Nordic Vikings, barbarians, next door neighbors to the Mongolians? Or were they Torah Jews or Talmud Jews, Kabbalah witchcraft book? I think we can all figure out which one it was. So yeah, then Russia had to clamp down and stop all that practices of taking all of the land and feeding the citizens during the good season a little bit of beer, and they would and other things, and loan them money, whatever else they were doing, so that they were all completely poverty stricken. And of course, you know, I guess some people would say, well, the citizens of those areas should have known better. They were poor people who were uneducated, and they were the property of the princes and dukes. They did not know any better. They did not have any kind of education, and they were preyed upon by these people that had moved in there. And the reason all these people had moved into that area was because in the 1500s, this was what I'm talking about, all this activity was 16 and 17 and 1800s, prior to World War I and World War II. But in the 1500s, Britain and Spain and all those countries in Europe had exiled and banished all the Jews because of the incompatibility with the religions. There were too many dead bodies showing up with the Jewish rituals, Kabbalah rituals, where they used human sacrifices and the blood of Christian young boys and other things. You know, you start finding some dead little boy bodies with holes punctured into them in the woods, and you can imagine the citizens in Spain and Britain and other places would unite with their pitchforks, and then the church had to step in and exiled the Jews from Spain and Britain and Italy and Germany and all these countries. Anyways, they fled to the Poland, Ukraine, Russian area, and then 100 years later, all the similar problems popped up there again. And so they had to take police action. So World War I and then the Bolshevik Revolution was a revenge because the German citizens and the Polish citizens were getting irate, and the Russian leadership wouldn't put up with it. So they all had to be destroyed for the police action taken on these people who had been ejected, exiled from Western Europe. FYI. So in the 1500s, all of these, here's Europe, all the Jews were exiled, and they had moved over to Ukraine and Poland and Russia, because that's where the Khazarians were, who had converted to Judaism, to Kabbalism 1,200 years ago, when the Jews being exiled from Spain and Britain and all those countries found out about all their Jewish brethren over there in the Ukraine area and Russian area and German area and Poland area and Georgia area, that's what they're called today. They went there, and then the problem was exacerbated, and then the Russian Tsar and the leadership had to take charge. So that's why they had a pre-revolution that failed in 2005. And of course, the way they got back into Britain and Spain and France and all those countries after being exiled in the 1500s, where they infiltrated slowly in the 1600s with money and bribed the leaders of Britain and France, and caused a revolution among the people, telling the people that their governments were treating them badly and that they would treat them better. So they had the king of Britain and the king of France beheaded. And so when the Jews were exiled from Spain and Britain and all those countries, and they went out to the Ukraine and Poland and Russia and got a lot of wealth, they came back and bribed all the politicians, created the revolution, beheaded the kings, and now we're again in control of the governments and the banking systems in Britain and in Spain and Italy and Germany. And in the United States, the new nation, we declared independence from these same banksters in England with the India Tea Company, smuggling heroin and other things all over the world. So initially, the United States was free of these Kabbalah, secret society, elites, banksters, but they did manage to infiltrate the United States government again after being ejected from this country during the Declaration of Independence, after we had a revolution against Britain. They did manage to, some of these banksters got into the United States and were doing the same thing, causing financial difficulties in this country in the early 1800s. And the President of America and the other leaders, the senators and representatives, withdrew their charter. Their corporation was canceled. Back then, you couldn't have a corporation. It had to be renewed each year, and you had to prove you were serving the public interest. So the corporations' treaties were not renewed, and they lost control of the banking system in the United States. Then, of course, they brought us the war between the North and the South to try to tear the nation apart. The same elite banksters, France and all those countries, and Britain were financing the North and the South, trying to destroy our nation. Anyways, after the war between the North and the South, they couldn't get control of the American money supply. But in 1913, they managed to do it with Woodrow Wilson. And then they were able to do World War I. Then they were able to do the Russian Revolution. And then, of course, they were able to bring the Great Depression. And then they were able to bring us World War II. And then, of course, they were able to bring us 9/11 and technological advances after World War II prior to 9/11, where they have all of these technologies prepared, ready, and waiting to be switched on to take control of the world's populations. And so many other revolutions and wars all over the world. It's been non-stop since then. So my 1 hour is up. So the United States at least succeeded in excluding mention of the planned territorial seizures of the treaty. But as has been seen, the objections were only in the making of such statements at the time. The facade of the Atlantic Charter was served temporarily, but the substance of the Russian demands was not refused, remained unaltered throughout the war. The president recognized that the territorial question would present itself eventually. There would be a proper time, but this was not the moment. Until that proper time, the Atlantic Charter banner was waved. So they had everybody believing that they were going to go into World War I for a just cause, for freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom to govern ourselves. These were 32-degree Masons, Illuminati people, banksters, who had an ulterior motive, and that was to destroy the whole Prussian Empire, World War II. And after that, of course, the world. Thank you for watching my video. I try to spit out this information as clearly as I can. Rick Miracle reporting.